The content of this podcast has not been evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA. It is educational in nature and should not be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified medical professional to see if a diet, lifestyle change, or supplement is right for you. Any supplements mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please note that the opinions of the guests or hosts are their own and may not reflect those of Advanced Orthomolecular Research Incorporated. Welcome to Supplementing Health, a podcast presented by Advanced Orthomolecular Research. We are all about applying evidence-based and effective dietary, lifestyle, and natural health product strategies for your optimal health. In each episode, we will feature very engaging clinicians and experts from the world of functional and naturopathic medicine to help achieve our mission to empower people to live their best lives naturally.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Supplementing Health. Today, we're talking about a really exciting topic, which is excellence in athleticism and lessons in fitness for the casual mover. And we have with us today Sarah Poulin, who is a certified nutritionist, health coach, lifestyle blogger, and definitely, I think, someone who has a lot of expertise and experience in this field, both with the excellence of athleticism and bringing a lot of these concepts back home so that we can integrate it into our daily lives, no matter what your fitness level is. So welcome and thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to, kind of bring my viewpoints into these topic discussions and, just super excited to be here.
Well, I think you strike a really interesting balance between helping people engage in their fitness, but then also making it very relatable and accessible, which is very important to do. You talk a lot on your website about the freedom of fitness rather than pivoting to this obsessive culture. Why do you think that it's so easy for it to become an obsession? And how do we start to avoid that?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I feel like this can target a lot of individuals, who maybe have been doing it, and also obviously people who are just beginning as well. When I think about like my own personal journey and, others that I've worked with, obviously, a lot of people go through this phase of really being so obsessive and really just diving in to the point where, there's obviously a point where the lifestyle is healthy, but when does it start becoming like obsessive and it's taking away from our life? And in reality, like this lifestyle that we start this endeavor on, it should be adding to our life. It should be bringing more peace and more balance and confidence and like empowerment. And it becomes very destructive for a lot of individuals. And I think a lot of that comes from when you start, results are very quick. So a lot of people get the mentality of like, okay, more is better. And they keep thinking, okay, I need to work out 6 days per week. I need to eat less. I need to keep doing more and more and more to try to get the result. But obviously, if you understand metabolism in the body, there's a point where you're actually doing more damage than good, but also taking away from your life. A lot of people, when they start this process as well, I think they are at a point where they want to fix themselves and they're at a point where they're so uncomfortable, they're upset, they're hating how they look and how they feel in their current space. So they try to do all these things at once and they become so obsessed and so enveloped, I guess, in like the process of it, that it's again, like taking away from really the point of doing it, which is obviously health, but obviously too, to add to your life. So the issue with a lot of this, I find, is it ends up creating a lot of resentment within the process. So they like it at first, they're getting the result, things are going really good. And then a plateau happens. And I also see this a lot as it creates this all or nothing mentality. They're all in, they're super strict, they're doing all the things, blah, blah, blah. But then life happens and then it kind of like makes them go all out. And it creates this like very up and down, like imbalanced, I guess, relationship with fitness and food that people don't find very sustainable. And then again, like they're not getting the result that they're looking for. And it's just creating a lot of resentment and then shame towards themselves. They feel defeated. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of diving down two different paths, but when you start hating it, like what's the point of doing it? And I think the biggest thing is making sure you're doing things that add to your life. And something, or a good question I like to have my clients ask themselves is, do you see yourself doing this in 6 months, in a year? Does it actually seem realistic? If the answer is no, then you need to figure out how can you incorporate this for the long term.
I think you've touched on some very important points. And one was around the shame of when we're doing something almost with motivations that are unexamined. If we don't understand why we're doing it, sometimes we digress into it. And again, that builds that resentment, which you've touched on. And, we see it's a fine balance, it seems, because athleticism has often been positioned as a point of excellence. It's like, if you can be athletic, you are excellent. And I think you said something really interesting, which is the metrics that we see where we're seeing improvement. And then when that plateaus, do you help your clients pivot what those metrics for success are? Are you helping them expand what, it's not just a weight loss strategy, but other metrics? Are you often incorporating, let's look at measurements, or let's look at different ways that aren't just weight loss?
Yeah. So really, I hate surrounding everything around weight. Again, like, not to bring it back to my own personal journey, but, everyone's all about weight loss, but, through my journey, I gained 30 pounds. So when does weight really matter? Obviously there is some extent, yes. But with a lot of my clients, I like looking at, how are we approaching things, especially with, so going into the all or nothing mentality, a lot of people, they go all in on their diet. They're not eating out. They're not enjoying the foods that they enjoy or whatever it is. And then the moment that life happens, or maybe they slip up and they have it, and they start to snowball from that. So I think it's important, and something that I work on with my clients is helping them learn to navigate these things so that it can blend in with like their goals. And also, how are they treating themselves after? Are they eating something and then being super guilty and shameful? And it's like, why? Like, why are you so mad that you ate a cookie? And again, just, coming back to what is serving you and what's not, and assessing progress in many factors. And weight it's really such a small piece of it. And when people start to understand how to assess progress outside of that number, into like how they're feeling and how they're viewing things, and also when it comes to fitness, obviously gaining strength in there, and just, feeling more confident in their skin, does weight really matter anymore? And I think it's such a freeing thing when clients can step away from valuing, like, seeing the scale down constantly, and they're valuing other parts of, like, oh my gosh, like, I allowed myself to do this and now I don't feel like crap, or, whatever it is, or they're going into the gym and they hit a new squat PR. Those kinds of things are how I like to, teach my clients, is I guess more the relationship with the scale and understanding it, essentially.
I love that so much. I think, especially with the patients that I work with, and even research, you see that health behavior change models often require some deep core value that's being addressed before you start making those changes. And I think what we've been sold is, yep, just change the way you look and hit this certain number. So I appreciate that you're shifting that narrative. You alluded to the fact that exercise can have lots of positive impacts outside of that weight loss. Can you speak to how exercise can be beneficial in very specific conditions? I'm thinking things like reversing insulin resistance, which we know there's this link with regular exercise. And can you delve into some of the mechanisms of that?
Yeah. So I guess like for the listeners, just kind of diving into like insulin resistance and what that is, but essentially it's your body no longer being responsive to insulin due to its high constant demand of needing it, and therefore it's not effectively shuttling glucose into the cells for energy anymore. So therefore it's just remaining in your bloodstream. So I guess diving into, the mechanisms with it. Well, first, I think a lot of people think that to, help your glucose levels and gain more insulin sensitivity is to cut all carbs and cut all sugar. And obviously that is like effective, but is it sustainable? Most likely no. And I think a lot of people, when they hear exercise, they think it needs to be like this extremely high impactful, like stressful, like exerting exercise to be effective for what they're looking for, whether it's weight loss or something like this that's more internal. But I find for myself and for my clients and for a lot of individuals, the most effective thing that you can do, I think, for insulin resistance and like weight loss is just walking. Like walking has so many beneficial benefits as far as mentally, it provides like a meditative state. It's going to boost your energy levels. It's going to promote better digestion and improve motility, reduce like cortisol, stress, and anxiety, which then has an impact on your stress levels, which also has an impact on your insulin resistance. So a lot of the times, like insulin resistance is a compounded effect of the lifestyle that we live today. High stress, low nutrient quality, sedentary jobs, which leaves our body not being responsive to utilizing that glucose anymore because we are so sedentary. We're not using it effectively within our cells for energy, essentially. And therefore, we have these constant high levels of glucose, which, then can lead to type 2 diabetes. So it's kind of like if you're filling up a cup, it can only hold so much water. So if you're constantly consuming so much, carbohydrates and sugar and energy for your body, but you're not effectively using it, that cup's going to spill over. And then it can no longer, fill that cup with your glucose for energy because there's just no more room for it. So as far as like, again, the impact of insulin resistance on the body, have you ever read the book, The Cortisol Connection?
I have not, no.
No. So it's very good at explaining how the day-to-day life that a lot of people live now and the impact of cortisol on top of that insulin resistance and how that has such a big impact on it. So I find that walking can be extremely effective, for a lot of individuals, just increasing your step count, but also looking at our day-to-day lives. So they're very sedentary. We have a lot of stress in our lives, and stress is going to cause this cortisol response as well, which is also going to release glucose into our bloodstream. So if you think about the cortisol response or that sympathetic nervous system response, like it's supposed to help us fight or flight. But now we're getting stressed out. We're getting that cortisol response. We're getting glucose broken down into our bloodstreams from, sitting in traffic and getting mad, or sitting at the computer working on, a project for work or whatever it is. And our body is no longer utilizing that energy that's being broken down from that response of stress, and not being effectively shuttled into our bloodstream. So it's causing, again, that same like repeated pattern, and then our body's no longer effectively shuttling those nutrients into our cells. Going back to like the exercise part, when we walk or, resistance training, I want to dive into that in a minute, but let's go back to the walking. we're converting that glucose that we're consuming into energy and we're utilizing it. The food is being broken down into glucose, into our bloodstream. Pancreas signals insulin, insulin shuttles it into our cells. And then, if we're sedentary, that process doesn't happen because we're constantly trying to fill those energy stores, but there's nowhere else to put them. So simple movement like walking can help, like I said, all those other benefits, but also improve insulin sensitivity. And then going into resistance training, I think, if there's any kind of exercise you should do, it should be walking and resistance training, because building muscle is going to also improve and reverse insulin resistance. So that's also going to change our body composition. If you have higher body fat, it's going to cause more insulin resistance because you have less uptake of that glucose into your cells. If you have more muscle mass, you basically, the way I like to word it to people, or like my clients to make it simple, is if you have a lot of muscle, you have to constantly be feeding it. So it's like a bunch of little babies inside of us that need to be fed. So if you build more muscle, you have a higher energy demand. So that glucose is going to be more uptaken into our cells, into our tissues, and utilized versus circulating into our bloodstream and causing that resistance factor.
And I think the consistency of it must be key, right? It's that we can't just have a casual walk every few days. It's the consistency and the length of that walk. Are you recommending that it's, like a intensive walk at a brisk pace, or is a casual stroll sufficient?
Yeah, so I think it again goes back to this is kind of diving into a topic that we'll dive into in a minute, but looking at the individual and what is their current habits. So if we have someone who's super, super sedentary and they're like barely moving throughout the day, maybe just, getting to their desk, to the fridge, whatever it is, their day-to-day tasks, then okay, let's just incorporate some more consistent walking, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then it could be, working up in that increment, let's shoot for 20, let's make it more brisk, let's shoot for a higher heart rate. So I think people get overwhelmed too because they think it needs to be like this to be effective, but it's more, okay, let's look at where the person currently is and let's work one step ahead of that. So then they can, one, not get overwhelmed with it, and two, start to build the habit of doing it instead of trying to go from nothing to going into a slight jog. They're going to be like, holy crap, that was the worst thing I've ever done. I can't do that again. But yes, consistency is definitely important. And I think just, again, walking is something that can be super consistent for a lot of individuals, just cleaning your house. I tell people, if you want to, get some movement, clean your house, and that will work on your step count or your daily movement for the day as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how easy it can be sometimes to not move, especially if we're working remotely or at our computers. And then you look to these stories, these, high competing Olympic athletes. Obviously, yourself, you're very engaged in this world and consistent with it. And it can be really inspiring, but it can also be really intimidating. So I think one of the key values or the key personality traits of athletes or, Olympic athletes or professional athletes seems to be this dedication. Again, that consistency, the commitment to making it part of every day. So what are some of those lessons that you think the everyday athlete can take? I mean, I know you said start simply and understand where you're at. Can you expand on that anymore?
Yeah. So as far as the lessons that we can take from, more, I guess, dedicated individuals, maybe competitors, Olympic athletes, that's the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So I think there's definitely a few key things that we can take away. And, the first thing is, obviously they are elite for a reason. That's what they live and breathe, that is their lifestyle. But there's a lot of mindset or skills that I think that we can acquire, not just for our wellness journeys, but as a parent, as maybe a new business owner. And I think that biggest skill is learning to delay gratification now, and learning to always ask yourself and act upon like what's going to project me forward for tomorrow, for next week, for a year from now to get where I want to be. So for example, if you're just starting out on your fitness journey, or you're building your new business or whatever it is, you're getting ready for work tomorrow, you have to learn to start delaying that gratification to be comfortable now and work on how do I want to feel tomorrow or next week. So, if it's starting your fitness journey, maybe that's learning to not eat the cookie every night because we're bored, to help us work on, maybe it is our insulin resistance, maybe it's just our weight loss journey, like whatever it is. It could be like investing in your savings to start your passion. That means less spending money now on like instant gratifying things, saving that money for something bigger. So I think one of the biggest things that we can take from these individuals that are so dedicated into this lifestyle is learning to delay that gratification. Because if you think about these athletes, they're delaying a lot of comfort. They are sleeping instead of spending time with their friends, or, they're dieting or being on some kind of nutrition regimen over the holidays because, they have the Olympics coming up, or they're missing out on time with friends and family because they need to practice more. They learn to delay that gratification. And the longer that they do so, they reap those larger rewards. And I think a lot of individuals who are starting their journey, if they can learn to delay that need to feel comforted or, gratified or validated now, or, seeking into like their behaviors that aren't helping them, it's going to be really freaking hard at first because it's uncomfortable. You've never felt that before. But once you start realizing, hey, like, okay, I stuck to my plan this week. Here's the reward. Like, I feel better, I'm sleeping better, I have more energy, like maybe I got some weight loss too. But delaying that instant gratification, I think, is what really projects people within their journey. And then obviously, like, for more the elite athlete, getting to that higher position, I guess you could say.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's, I think, and sometimes we need to hear to then motivate us, have your larger goal in mind and keep that kind of at the forefront for motivation. Now that we've kind of established, okay, fitness is obviously very important. It's a very important pillar. How do you help the individuals that come to you build that routine and the plan to make it more sustainable, to make it really effective?
Yeah. So
What's your process with them?
Yeah, I really like that question because, well, one, when someone's trying to start something, they usually look at, all the different diets that are out there, or maybe someone that they know is successful with something, or they go on Google and, find all the things that they're looking for. And the problem with a lot of those things is, again, it's seeking something that isn't specific for them. So earlier I mentioned with like the walking thing, you need to look at your current starting space and like, what does that look like? And then start building upon it. So for example, a lot of individuals that come to me are, especially women, are typically under eating, especially in the protein department. So if I have like a long-term goal of them eating, over 100 grams of protein or something, but they're only eating like 40, I'm not going to start them there. It's going to be more like, okay, from 40, let's try 50. And then from 50, let's try 60. So I think it's important for each person to look at their current space and not let all the noise of all these things that you need to do and all these different regimens and guidelines and like boxes to fit in to be successful, and just build upon your current space. Because I guess going into my next point with like being effective and sustainable is you have to build habits, and then you have to build confidence within them. Because if you highball it, let's say you go from 0 days of working out to 6, you might do it for a week, you might do it for 2, but then more than likely life's going to happen that's going to be very unrealistic. And then you're going to feel like a failure because you didn't reach the 6 days that you felt like you needed to do, when in reality, okay, I'm starting at 0. Let's maybe just shoot for 2. Let's get confident with it. Like, let me show up for that really consistently. And then once I do so, maybe let's add 3. Let's see how I feel there. Let's see how consistent I can be there. So I think, again, looking at that starting space and building in the things that are going to help you move forward instead of going from point A to point B all at once.
And are there specific tools or gear? I think a lot of times people are waiting to start their fitness journey until they get a gym membership or until they get the proper yoga mat, or they get their Fitbit watch. Are there tools that you need, or do you find all of that is kind of noise?
I think it depends on the person. I think a lot of people are usually looking for guidance because there is so much noise and so many things out there, and to support. I think one of the biggest tools that most people need is to build a strong mindset, to build a big belief system in themselves and learning to trust the process. Because again, like, most people want results yesterday. And when they don't get that, they think that they're failing. So then they kind of result in these, or I don't want to say result, but turn into like these sabotaging habits that are going to keep them from moving forward because they feel like they can't do it. So I think building a strong mindset, whatever that might look like for that person. So it might just be like learning yourself. Am I telling myself I can't do it before I even begin? Do I give up like after I mess up for a day? Or, I went out to eat and, then I kind of snowball from there. So I think building the foundation of it all, I really think, is a strong mindset. And if you don't have that, you need to seek that by either A, learning yourself, or B, having someone guide you so that they can kind of instill that belief and that confidence and that strength in you until you inherit that.
Yeah, I love that. And also that person can be someone who helps guide and helps you utilize those tools I always say that we can look at your sleep-wake cycles, or we can look at these different lab tests, but until you understand how to interpret them, all of those values are meaningless unless there's context. So I think what you can offer is that context for people. Now, shifting gears a little bit, but still, I guess, on the topic of tools for fitness and health, are you utilizing any supplementation? Is that something that can be important in specific cases? And what do those cases usually look like?
Yeah, I think supplements definitely has its time and place for sure. So again, like, even for myself personally and the client, like, looking at what are their current eating habits and how can we start incorporating more, nutrient density there, more wholesome foods there to provide, more of bioavailable forms of foods instead of supplements. A lot of people think, oh, I got to buy the protein shakes and the green supplements and all these different things. And again, like, I think a lot of that stuff is noise. And instead it's like, okay, let's look at our current eating habits and what are some things that we can, I don't want to say clean up, but I guess start to modify there to meet, our goals and our health profile. I do think that there are some foundations within supplementation, especially for myself personally. So I think omega-3s, like the EPA DHA, is a really great one if you aren't consuming like a lot of fatty fish, which a lot of people, I would say, don't consume a lot of fatty fish on a week-to-week basis. So I think an omega-3, a multivitamin is usually a good one, especially if you are trying to reduce your intake, like your food intake. You're not just decreasing calories, you're also decreasing nutrients. So if you are going into any kind of cut or like deficit, like a multi, I think is definitely important to plug in there. There are some other specific supplements that I like to utilize with some clients. A lot of people struggle with like digestion issues, sleep issues sometimes, and sometimes it's just looking into like their lifestyle habits. Are they including complex carbs? Do they have vegetables in there? Are they looking at their phone a lot during the day or going to bed at like a bunch of weird, crazy times and not allowing a lot of parasympathetic rest? So there are some supplements that I think can help, but at the end of the day, supplements are supplements. So you can't fix things through supplements, but they can help I guess, progress you as you are changing those lifestyle things. For example, some things that I like to include maybe when there's more stress in your life, or if you're dieting, because dieting is essentially a stressor on the body. Things like ashwagandha, I think, is a really good one. Theanine, B complex, maca, those are all ones that I've personally incorporated for myself. They're, basics that I think a lot of people can benefit from.
Yeah, you also said you see a lot of women with low protein intake, and I definitely experienced that in clinic as well. It can be quite difficult to get it, at the right amounts that we need. Or do you rely on any particular types of protein powders or recommend any specific ones?
Yeah, again, like protein powder, is it a need? No. Or is it a must? I should say no. Like if you want it, I think it's great to add variety and also help individuals who struggle, with their protein intake. I still think foods are going to be superior. You don't want to be consuming protein powders for like 3 out of your 4 meals or something like that, but it's something I use, usually once per day at least, just because I like the variety. As far as a preference on that, I personally like a whey isolate. It is the most bioavailable form. It's usually a lot easier to digest. It usually has less carbs and fats in it. As far as specific brands, I mean, there's so many out there. I think finding just one that tastes good to you, usually chocolate, I think is one that you can't go wrong with. But yeah, again, is it a must? No, everyone thinks that you need to have it. The other issue that I see sometimes with protein, not so much powder, but like all the bars and stuff that they have out there that are like protein, whatever, it causes a lot of GI distress. And people don't realize that until we take it out. And then they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm not bloated anymore. I'm having like normal BMs now, stuff like that. So I think it's important to use it again as something to benefit you and help you, but not to rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes people, chug too much protein all at once, whereas naturally when we're eating or consuming high protein foods, it's more slowly introduced to the system rather than this huge hit all at once. So certainly, and I think also you saying that supplementation is meant to just be that. It is an additive and a tool. And like you said, with all the tools, there's a right time and place for them. So do you tend to have a basic formula that you utilize in your coaching that balances the type and intensity of physical activity as well as the diet and supplementation regime, kind of as a base? Like, what is your process if you meet a new client? How are you thinking about, okay, I need to start you need to start going on this. You've given us some really great examples of how you tailor recommendations to individual needs, but do you have kind of like a skeleton formula that you use?
Yeah, so I do, again, I hate saying this because I don't want people to go use it and then like rely on this, but I do like to calculate like BMR and look at their current activity level and look at their current breakdown of what their intake is as a blueprint, because at the end of the day, like calculating your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, for people who don't know that, it's not like specific to you. It's a guideline towards like what your current age, height, and weight is, but it's not a set all be all until you learn to apply something and see how the body's responding. So essentially when clients come to me, like I look at their current intake, I look at these numbers that I kind of calculate, and I kind of meet in the middle. So again, going back to that protein example, if they're only consuming 40 grams of protein and they want to build more muscle and look, quote unquote, more toned, we got to increase that intake. We got to support more protein synthesis. So we got to start incorporating, okay, let's go from 40 and let's start getting more consistent with 60. And same thing with, other macronutrients, if they're consuming too much fats or maybe too many carbs or like vice versa, whatever it is. So I kind of create a blueprint based on that. But then when I start working with the client, we can see how the body is responding to what we're applying. Maybe for example, individuals who are under eating and we start slowly increasing their intake, the first couple weeks, they usually feel super satisfied. One, because we're focusing on more nutrient quality. And two, they're eating more than what they were, and their metabolism is so adapted to the low intake that they were taking. But then once they start getting consistent with that, those hunger cues start coming up. And then it's like, okay, we can start introducing more food so that we're fueling your metabolism instead of pulling away from it. So I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but I do kind of,
absolutely.
yeah. And then as far as the movement, again, it's looking at what's going to be feasible for them in their lifestyle. If they're a mom and they have 2 kids and their husband is gone like most of the day, they probably can't work out 5 times per week. So, okay, let's do 2. And usually I like to focus a lot on progressive overload, building muscle, because I think even as like a woman, it's very important to build muscle. It's very empowering. So helping them get consistent with that and learn to be intentional with their training versus just doing a million different things in the gym or at home, wherever they're doing it, just to get it, checked off or whatever.
Yeah, and I love that you said that the empowerment that comes with building that muscle. It's like when you can now lift something or you integrate those movements into your daily life, it feels so great. You're like, I couldn't have done that before. So it's a big moment. I thank you so much for this information. It's, I think, really valuable, and what you've done is simplified it for people. So you don't have to be the Olympic athlete to move. You just need consistency, that mindset of knowing your larger goals and committing to them, and then some guidance. So where can, I know you have your website, fitfitnessfreely.com, that's launching, and your social media. So where can everybody find you?
Yeah, so like you said, my website, fitnessfreely.com. You can also find me on Instagram. That is where I'm most active, at Sarah Fit Fitness. And I do have a private Facebook group. If you just search Fit Fitness Freely, it's where I kind of do a lot more in-depth. I'm also doing monthly workshops right now where I'm just providing more hands-on information. I like to do like lives to talk about more of the mindset that goes into the journey. So you can join that community. And that is it.
Yeah, well, that's great. And again, thank you for your time. Our listeners, I think, all will have taken a lot from this.
Thank you for listening to Supplementing Health. For more information about our guests, past shows, and future topics, please visit aor.ca/podcast or aor.us/podcast. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? We invite you to engage with us on social media to request a future topic or email us at marketing@aor.ca. We hope you tune in again.